My parents really just treated me like a normal child. I had an older sister, and when I was growing up, the providers basically said, let her learn her own limits.
Welcome to the CHC Podcast, Congenital Heart Conversations. I am Anna Jaworski and a heart mom to an adult with a single ventricle heart. I have a co-host with me today.
Hi, I'm Annie Ulchak, and I was born with nomenclature hypoplastic left heart syndrome.
I'm so happy that you're with me today, Annie, and I'm so excited for us to talk to three amazing guests about living with congenital heart disease, or CHD, as an adult and having had 0 or only 1 open heart surgery. At the end of the meeting, our 2 co-producers, Ayrton, Beatty, and Nicholle Bilodeau, will talk with us about what they learned from the panel discussion. And we also have a volunteer and a patron here with us, and we'll get to hear from them as well.
Today's episode deals with how some adults in the congenital heart defect, CHD, community have lived to adulthood with only 1 or even no open heart surgery.
Our first panelist is Amy Erhart. Amy was born with hypoplastic left heart syndrome, or HLHS. Amy was born in 1983 and first had a closed heart VT shunt placed 6 days after birth. A second shunt placed at the age of 2, and her only open heart surgery was at the age of 10. Amy also has some arrhythmias, which required the implantation of a pacemaker. More recently, she had a cardioversion and is currently handling her arrhythmias via medication.
Our second panelist is Ben Johnson. In 1983, when Ben was 4 years old, he had his one and only open heart surgery to repair his CHD, pathology of below. Ben believes it's important for heart warriors to implement good nutrition, exercise, and a healthy lifestyle.
Our last panelist is a return guest, Michelle DeRoo. She was born in 1969 with truncus arteriosus, and at that time, surgical intervention was rare and with low survival rates. She re-engaged with the adult congenital heart team at the Mayo Clinic as a teenager, where her condition has been managed without cardiopulmonary surgery since 1987. Today, she lives with her husband, Mark, and their dog, Sophie, in North Carolina. Michelle recently had an essay published in the new book, The Heart of a Heart Warrior, and she was a guest on this program in February 2024. Welcome to the CHC Podcast, Amy.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to be here.
I'm excited to talk to you today, and I'll be starting the interview with one question for all of you, and that is, all of you were born decades ago when care for children with CHDs wasn't as refined as it is today. To help our audience understand what it was like for you to grow up with your CHD, can you share with us when you were diagnosed and how your parents reacted, and also what your childhood was like? And we'll start with you, Amy.
My parents did not know that I had a heart defect when I was born. They found out when my mom gave birth, and I was a blue baby. I was transferred up to Toledo Hospital, and that's when I was diagnosed with hypoplastic left heart syndrome. From there, my parents really just treated me like a normal child. I had an older sister, and when I was growing up, the providers basically said, let her learn her own limits. I was from a really small town, so my mom and dad just gave me free rein to do whatever I want and learn how I needed to learn. My childhood was actually really amazing. Played sports here and there, but nothing too serious. Overall, my childhood was really great. My parents helped with that, and so did my whole family. So it was awesome.
And I just think that's amazing. Sometimes not having the knowledge that something could go wrong is actually a blessing, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. I think at the end of the day, my overall health was essentially really great. They were very blessed in that aspect and just let me run wild.
That seems like such a blessing.
Welcome to the CHC Podcast, Congenital Heart Conversations, Ben.
Thank you so much. I'm very excited to be here.
What was it like for you to grow up with your CHD? Can you share with us when you were diagnosed, how your parents reacted, and what was your childhood like?
Yeah, of course. I was diagnosed with tetralogy of Fallot about 9 months after I was born. My parents knew there was an issue upon birth, but didn't have an official diagnosis for the first 9 months or so. I had one surgery at the age of 4 in 1983. At the time, I remember doctors were pretty conservative with activity and exercise recommendations, but my parents really didn't limit what I did. They kind of let me be a normal kid. The only time I remember my mom freaking out was when I was riding on a big wheel shortly after surgery. Not 100% sure if that was due to my heart condition that she was worried or because I was probably flying down a hill between trees and things young boys do. I remember teachers in elementary school asking about my heart condition and if I was okay. So I know that my parents at least mentioned my CHD to school staff. Aside from that, I had a pretty normal, active childhood. I appreciate the fact that my parents just let me be a kid and let me do my thing. I enjoyed hiking, camping, swimming, climbing trees, most of which I still do today. When I was older, I played musical instruments. I marched in parades and field shows and was pretty active and never felt out of breath or anything. Today, aside from my annual checkups with consists of echoes, treadmill stress tests, and one cardiac catheterization that I can remember. And then, of course, being reminded of my scar when I look in the mirror, I really don't feel like my heart condition affects me on a day-to-day basis. When I transitioned from my pediatric cardiologist, I was almost 30, but my pediatric cardiologist retired. He spent some time explaining my condition and treatment to my wife, which I certainly appreciated.
Wow, that's amazing. And you didn't transition until you were almost 30. I know I transitioned for myself at 16.
Yeah, I remember the rooms were so small, the table was so small. I had to sit up anytime somebody tried to come in the door because my feet hung off the table.
That's great. I think the positive of me being short is I always seem to fit on the kids' stuff. But
There you go.
exactly. And
Uh,
like you, my parents would mention it to the people who did the gym activities during grade school and high school, but
Yep.
otherwise I just did everything. I even did the things you weren't really supposed to do, but I never told my parents. How about you?
Same here. Same here. I still don't tell them.
Yeah, same.
I have a
Thank you.
feeling Amy didn't either since she said she was a wild child.
Yep.
100%.
I love that. Okay, Michelle, welcome back to the CHC podcast.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's such a delight to be here.
I'm so happy you're back with us today.
Michelle, what was it like for you to grow up with your CHD? Can you share with us when you were diagnosed and how your parents reacted? And also, what was your childhood like? My childhood was long before some of our other panelists, and there weren't a lot of options at that point. I wasn't diagnosed until I was almost 2 years old, and it took several different children's hospitals to figure out what was going on. I was finally diagnosed at the Mayo Clinic in 1972. At the end of the day, my parents were told there were surgeries available, but the likelihood of survival of the surgery itself was rather small. They were told to take me home and do the best they could, and I wouldn't make it much past 9 or 10. At that point in time, we went home. I don't have many memories of the medical experiences as a young child. Growing up, I was told I had a heart condition and I was excused from gym class to the envy of most of my classmates, all through high school for sure. I just did my thing. I got in a lot of trouble doing things I shouldn't do, but we didn't really talk about my heart condition. My parents always raised me with the idea that no one can do everything, but everyone can do something. Find your something and go do it. My team sports, I was a mathlete. Insert geek here, right? I was involved in Girl Scouts. I was involved in computers and technology. My father developed point of sale scanners in the 70s, if you remember when they first had barcodes. I followed him around writing database protocols and things along those lines. I was always a geek, but that worked for me. I was diagnosed in 87 by Dr. Carol Warrens at the Mayo Clinic as almost an adult. At that point, it was the first time I really knew what was going on and what my insides did. And we discussed my going to college. My parents were not thrilled, but I went. I had several strokes as a result of the extra blood in my body that is produced from the bone marrow as a result of the low oxygenation from the lungs. And at the end of the day, I just made it through. I learned how to walk again. I learned how to write with my right hand at the age of 19 and went on from there. I ended up with a master's degree and led Dell Computers on their project management for technology for many years before I retired in 2015.
You have the
Wow.
most amazing story, Michelle. And I'm so honored that you also shared your story in The Heart of a Heart Warrior, Volume 3. Friends, if you haven't read that book yet, it's worth it just to read Michelle's story. Thank you
Yeah,
for sharing so much. It's so inspiring, Michelle.
thank you, Anna. The reality is congenital heart disease is much like being born with brown eyes. It's what we have, it's what we deal with, and it's how we live our lives around that that really makes a difference. I always hope that all of us can be an inspiration to younger patients and their families about the possibilities and not to dwell so much on the restriction.
Oh, I love that. Absolutely. Ben, you're currently 45 years old and you have a passion for fitness. I just loved listening to you earlier talk about riding your big wheel, getting in trouble, and being in marching band. I was in marching band, and that is really strenuous, especially in Texas. We don't actually start to get cooler weather usually until the end of September. So that first month of marching band during the football games was torture. It was so
That had
hot.
to be brutal,
It was
right?
brutal. Where were you in marching band?
I'm in Wisconsin. We get to
Oh.
enjoy one day it being 95 degrees, and then the next day it's 30 something. So we got experience all the temperature extremes. Fall in Wisconsin is like that.
Oh my goodness, I can't even imagine that. Tell me how you first became interested in living a healthy lifestyle and how you feel this has impacted your health as an adult with a congenital heart condition.
Absolutely. I think my fitness routine definitely helps me feel good and move well and stay healthy. I've been interested in fitness my whole adult life. I really got serious about things 4 years ago. There are two brothers who are trainers in Brooklyn. I've been following their training online. They've written a number of books, so I had been reading those. When COVID hit, they did some Zoom workshops when everybody was first learning how to use Zoom. And I did a couple of those with them. And then one of the brothers, because all the gyms were closed, he decided to do some training in person. So I did a couple sessions with him and then signed on and have been training with him once a week for, it's been over 4 years now. Currently, my routine is 5 days a week of strength training, which is a mix of calisthenics and weightlifting. And then I run 3 to 4 days a week. As far as diet goes, I try to eat high protein, as much fruits and veggies as I can. I limit grain-based carbs. I just don't feel great on them. And I do intermittent fasting 2 to 4 days a week. I definitely feel better now than I did in my teens, 20s, and 30s. I'm very active outside of the gym. I own a home pet care business, so I'm walking dogs a lot, working with pets. And I feel that I'm able to work all day and be active and still have the energy to take my dogs for a walk at night or throw the football around with my son. I really think fitness, diet, and stress management too have really helped in every aspect of my life and helped me to be in my mid 40s and living with a congenital heart defect without too much impact.
I love the fact that you do dog walking, but you always make time for your own dogs too.
I do.
Yeah, it's so easy to neglect our own, isn't it?
They don't give me much of a choice. They're jumping on me if I'm not getting them out.
I love that. Michelle, what do you attribute your success to? And what advice do you have for others who don't have a surgical intervention available to them or who believe they're better off without open heart surgery because of the risks involved?
I think it's a personal decision at a family level. I think everyone needs to understand what is happening and what isn't happening and why. For me, it just didn't make sense then. There really weren't choices. But growing up without the surgery was a smaller pool of people. So for the congenital heart community, 98% have had surgery, and there's a certain camaraderie there. There are very few of us that have not had surgery. and it's a much smaller pool. So it's hard to find people to share that thought with. But for those who haven't had surgery, number one, always feel free to reach out. Happy to chat about it. But the reality is that a life well lived is a reward in and of itself, regardless of the physiology that I come with. Trying to be a good person, make good choices, those things don't really change based on your heart or your lungs. It's just being who you were meant to be. And I think a strong family is part of how I turned out so well. And I have good friends. Actually, we just saw friends of ours from high school 2 days ago. And those friendships bully you in the difficult times. I cannot overstress the value of having some of those connections for long periods of time, both in and out of the congenital heart community, because people know you from when you were younger. And then as you age and your body and your life changes, it's nice to have people who remember you when, probably a little more as someone who struggles with some of the challenges that CHD can provide.
That makes so much sense. Our podcast is listened to all over the world, and there are a lot of places that don't offer surgical interventions like we have here in the United States. So I think your community may be larger than you think, Michelle, but you would have to look much further from home to find those
Yes, very
people.
possibly.
I'm working with an organization called Global Arch, and that is their purpose, to provide awareness and support to people all over the world. And it's distressing to see how many people across the globe pass away so early in their lives because there are no surgical interventions. And think the fact that you've made it as far as you have, having had such a great quality of life. And I think a lot of that has to do with your own personal work ethic and your own personality. You just radiate positivity, and that goes a long way.
Thank you, Anna.
Amy, you and I were born with HLHS, hypoplastic left heart syndrome. And like you, I had the BT shunt, which is known as the Bilodeau Taussig shunt. And it's also now known as the Bilodeau Thomas Taussig shunt as a closed heart procedure. But I'm sure I wouldn't be alive today without having had the Fontan when I was a child. Do you think you could tell us what surgery you expect to have at the Cleveland Clinic and any words of advice for others who need to have their first open heart surgery later in life?
Actually, my care is at Columbus Children's currently. Honestly, I had the Fontan 36 years ago, and we're really just monitoring at this point with the HLHS. And I am very blessed and lucky that I'm doing so well with my defect that transplant is talked about, but the emphasis is not really placed on that yet, which I find is wonderful. On a personal level, I think to myself, when you're younger, it's like, where are you going to be in your 40s? And now I know these things are being talked about, but I know I'm not there yet either. So I'm just so happy that I'm sustaining a healthy and normal life at this point.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I completely agree with you about feeling blessed to last this long with what we have. I'm at Boston Children's, and like you, I've been very fortunate to not need any further other than the BT and Fontan. I know a lot of others get revisions, and like you said, transplant is talked about. And for me, it's just the monitoring and the whisper of a transplant, but not because I need it. It's just something they say you need to think of when the time comes. It's pretty amazing to continue without needing anything further.
Oh, absolutely. And like you said, it's talked about, it's whispered. I had met with a transplant team, and my provider basically said, we want you to do this now so you have a little bit of information, because when it's time, we don't want to be scrambling. He said, we're finding now that in the past, we were just waiting too long for patients to say, it's now time for the transplant, whereas they are trying to retro that at this point and be prepared for the future because they know it's coming, because we are living longer, which is such a beautiful thing as well.
Yes. For me, when they offered, I declined it. I chosen not to become a transplant recipient. Instead, they offer when it's time palliative care and then going forward from there. Just a very simple, easy way of transitioning out.
Yeah, that's it. When the time comes, it's going to be a big decision. I
Mhm.
can't say I'm looking forward to it, but if I have the information, I guess it just depends on how my health is and how I feel at that time to make those big decisions. And the older we get, I think we're more sound in mind to make those decisions. When we're young, it's so hard to figure out what the future holds for us.
100%. I completely agree. Thank you so much. Now, Michelle, can you tell us what
Yes.
you think the future holds for you and what role you expect your congenital heart defect to play in your future?
I'll echo the sentiments expressed just now. There are so many more options. I am eligible at getting close to 60, a transplant, if it makes sense. I also have wonderful therapeutics that help with my pulmonary hypertension, which is a large contributor to some of the challenges that I face. And I saw 2 weeks ago, we have a new mechanical heart that has been tested, I believe, in Texas, that also presents an option because some of us have a requirement for transplant of heart and lungs together. The mechanical hearts also give us a potential to be able to separate those two surgeries because you can make adjustments in a mechanical environment that you can't in a tissue environment. The most important thing for me is just the ability to have a choice. I've had a wonderful life. I've enjoyed every minute of it. I am blessed with everyone and everything in my life and being able to extend my life and hopefully the service and duties that I do in my everyday is amazing. And I think those opportunities are going to continue to come and hopefully be able to make all of us healthier and live longer, more productive lives as a result.
Holy moly. That mechanical heart thing, it sounds amazing. And it's wonderful. That's now an option out there for others.
It's in its early stages, but we've
My
seen so
goodness.
many things develop so quickly that I think there's lots of opportunity that lies ahead for everyone.
Oh, I'm super excited about that. Amy, can you tell us what you think the future holds for you and what role you expect your CHD to play in your future?
Yeah. Overall, I feel today the sky is the limit. We're faced with so many things when we're younger. And I think because we're young and immature, we don't know how to deal with that in our late teens, 20s, and maybe even sometimes 30s. I know that I struggled with that a lot through those ages. And I hit my upper 30s. And on my 40th birthday, I was like, you know what? It's time to just live and be happy. I never thought I would make it to 40. It just gave me this newfound love and zest. And I feel like I turned a lot of my life around. Not that it was bad in the first place, because it was wonderful, but I just have a new outlook and so much more appreciation and gratitude towards life. All the things that were stressors in the past of the decisions I had to make and some of the resentment that you feel and anger that you feel, I just felt it was time to let it go. Truly, I feel like that's where I am right now, just wanting to live my life to the fullest with all the people that I love and make an impact in this community. Everyone sitting here talking about it and people opening up and listening is huge for the community, raising awareness and fundraising. Like I spent a whole year planning a fundraiser and we just had it last weekend and raised $20,000. Like that's where my future is. Let's give back to the community because we're living longer and we freaking deserve it. Let's rock and roll is my thought.
Yes, absolutely. Who was the fundraiser for?
So it goes to congenital heart defects, actually. I'm from such a small town. We basically close down our town and we ride golf carts and walk around. And 25 different businesses from town made putting greens. And it was called Putt Around Kaleida. And you paid to putt. We had raffles. We had a dunk tank. We had 50-50. And people just come out for a community of Kaleida, a family fun day, and raise awareness. And those funds go to the Nationwide Children's in Columbus Heart Camp. We donated to another nonprofit organization. And then another girl that's part of the fundraiser, her daughter goes to Cincinnati Children's Hospital. So we donate our funds there as well. We just spread the love wherever it's needed at the locations that we go to.
Wow, I absolutely love that. That is so amazing. The entire town comes together.
We had almost, oh gosh, I'm going to say 200 golfers, putters, if you will. And even the ones that didn't putt, they were still there just for the event and to share the appreciation for the cause.
Wow, I absolutely love
Mhm.
that. Was this spearheaded by you?
Myself, my sister, and a good friend of ours from our hometown. Yes.
Wow, good on you. That's
Thank
amazing.
you. Thank you.
Yeah, that is pretty amazing. Having that impact and advocacy is what our community definitely needs. So thank you. Ben, can you tell us what the future holds for you and what role you expect your CHD to play in your future?
Yes. First of all, I just want to say how humbled I am to be involved in a conversation with people with such wonderful stories and positive outlooks on things. It's humbling. I know that my CHD will always be a part of me and something I'll have to monitor for my entire life. I had really no changes in my annual testing for years and years. And then last fall, I had an episode of ventricular tachycardia as I was recovering after a stress test. I wore a Holter monitor for a few weeks for follow up and changed beta blockers. So things are stable now, but things are being followed. There's certainly a chance that it will need to be addressed sometime down the road with a cardioversion or pacemaker or some other treatment. And that kind of hit me a little bit when there's no changes for so long. And then all of a sudden you have a concern. It definitely grabs your attention. But I'm really trying to just continue to live my life. And it's really helped me, as others have said, live in the moment, enjoy each day and each opportunity. If and when I have to have another procedure, surgery, I'm just going to try to get myself in the best place mentally and physically to be able to deal with that in a positive way. I do feel like staying in good shape and exercising helps give me a heads up. If I'm working out and I can only do half of what I did, where I'm way more exhausted than what I did the previous week, I know that there's something wrong. So it gives me a heads up because I know my baseline. I just like to continue to offer support to families who have SCHD in their family, particularly parents with young kids. As a patient with the CHD, and now as a parent, I do have a heart healthy kid. I realize that you worry much more about your kids than you ever did about yourself. So now that I'm in my 40s, I realize that this was way harder on my parents than it ever was on me. So I want to continue to provide that support for parents who just got a diagnosis or who are dealing with surgery or post surgery with their kids. And I'll definitely advocate for nutrition and fitness and a healthy lifestyle as much as I possibly can.
Wow, that is so beautiful, Ben. And
Thank
you're
you.
right. When you have something come up after it being so quiet for so long, where all you do is stare in the mirror, and that's how you're reminded you have a CHD, and then
Right.
something happens, your whole world instantly changes. And you're like, wait a minute, there's more I have to worry about. There are all
Yes.
these new things and medications and stuff where maybe throughout your life you didn't have any of that. It is eye opening, and it's wonderful that you're willing to help out other CHDers with their health and diet because that is huge. And then supporting the parents behind that too, because you're right. We don't understand as patients what our parents go through, and we only get glimpses from time to time.
Yeah. And I think it's so critical. I'm glad to see that a lot of the recommendations about exercise, particularly, has changed from when I was a kid, where it was don't lift heavy, don't run too much, take it easy, to where that's being encouraged now. And I think with obesity and other health concerns being so prevalent in our society, that's probably a bigger danger than for people even
Mhm.
who have health concerns
Yeah.
or who
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
heart concerns.
Yeah, and I remember when my child was young and she just turned 30 that
Awesome.
I know, I'm so excited that she made
That's
it to
great.
that big 3-0. It's really huge. But she was emaciated when she was first diagnosed. And I remember the doctors pretty much encouraged me to let her eat whatever she wanted because we didn't think that she would grow to the age of 30. We didn't think that obesity
Yeah,
would be an issue. And now they are being more careful with what they talk to us about regarding diet. And as a
right.
parent of a heart warrior, thank you for being willing to go out there and talk to other parents. Talking to all of you adults was a dream that I dared not even envision 30 years ago. I so desperately wanted to believe that my daughter would grow up, and hearing all of your stories just fills my heart with so much pride and gives me so much hope for the future CHDers who are coming along the path. You guys are just amazing.
That means a lot. Thank you.
I want to thank all of our panelists for sharing and for coming back on the program today. So thanks, Michelle.
Thank you.
And Ben, thank you so much for coming on the podcast. It's been great getting to know you.
It's been my absolute pleasure. Thank you.
And Amy, I'm so happy to have you on my new podcast. I'm thrilled that you could come on the CHC podcast today.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. It's a good thing. I'm loving this whole new lease on everything. So thank you.
It's definitely been our pleasure.
When we come back, it'll be time for our patrons and volunteers to ask questions or share their experiences.
Embark on a heartwarming odyssey with Baby Heart's Pressure Gateway to uplifting stories for the CHD community. Introducing the Heart of a Heart Warrior book series, inspiring those born with heart defects and their loved ones. Discover the heart of a mother, the heart of a father, and my brother needs an operation. Books celebrating strength, love, and familial support. Visit babyheartspress.com and be part of our loving community, uplifting hearts one story at a time. The CHC Congenital Heart Conversations podcast is a presentation of Hearts Unite the Globe, or HUG, and is part of the HUG Podcast Network. HUG is a nonprofit organization devoted to providing resources to the congenital heart defect community to enrich the lives of our community members. For free CHD resources, please visit our website at congenitalheartdefects.com.
You are listening to the CHC Podcast. If you have a question or comment that you would like addressed on our show, please send an email to Anna Jaworski at anna@thechcpodcast.com. That's anna@thechcpodcast.com. Now, back to the CHC Podcast.
Welcome back. We're talking about what it's been like to live with a CHD as an adult when you've had only one or no open heart surgeries. And now our audience of volunteers and patrons can share their experiences or ask questions of our panelists. If you are interested in becoming a volunteer or a patron, please visit the Hearts Unite the Globe website to join us, and it's heartsunitetheglobe.com. Let's start with Frank Jaworski. He is my husband, and he's also the dad of a heart warrior, our heart warrior, who is known as Hope. Frank, did you want to ask a question, sweetie?
I love your stories. It's fascinating, the ones of you that did not have to go through surgery and all the different paths your lives took. My child had 2 open surgeries before the age of 1. The stress level was different and applied in a different way. The only time we were ever told that our child did not have much of a chance of growing up was basically before the first surgery. After that, we always felt that there was some kind of hopeful landmark out there for us to shoot for. So the way some of you were, your families were told that there wasn't much hope or only to a certain age, that's a little scary. And we were lucky that we didn't have that put upon us.
Well,
And
I
I
would
think
politely disagree with you, my love.
yeah,
And maybe it's because you didn't go to the doctor's appointments like I did because you were working. But no, even after the first surgery, Hope's cardiologist told me she was a ticking time bomb until the Fontaine.
we didn't like him that much anyway.
I know I work like Michelle. Michelle had a cardiologist who said things to her that she didn't agree with, and she found a new cardiologist. And
Yeah,
that's what we did
that's
as
what we
well.
did.
That's what we did too. Yeah.
Yeah. And it seems also that the people who grew up with non-surgical management of their heart defects were more aware of their limitations, and their parents were more aware of what things to do or not to do, whether or not they did them. But it seems like a different flavor to their youth than Hope had.
Again, I would politely disagree with you. I'm sorry, honey, but I think that Hope getting her black belt is proof that she didn't let her CHD limit her, even though we did have limitations that were put on her. She pretty much did what she wanted to do. And we just found ways to handle the difficulties. Like when she wanted to be in swim club and she had so much difficulty, we're lucky to get a swim coach who said, okay, she could wear a wetsuit. And that made the difference between her being able to be in the swim club and not be in the swim club. I think when you are creative and when you really want something, you can find a way to make it happen, don't you?
Sure. Yes.
Hey, Guy. Thank you so much for also being on. For those who don't know, Guy is a congenital heart patient as well and a volunteer with us at the CHC Podcast. Guy, would you like to say something?
Oh, and what? I really enjoyed all three panelists' stories, Michelle's, because I'm also a lifelong Mayo Clinic person, and I've also had a transplant at Mayo. I appreciate what you have been going through, and God bless you for making it so far. And I enjoyed how you explained yourself very well with your health and wellness and how you incorporated intermittent fasting to your life. And Amy, I really also enjoyed your talking about going for a transplant, like putting on the back burner. I agree with that, but you need more time for yourself to get more prepared for that.
Thanks, Guy. That's pretty amazing. And appreciate you thanking everyone and giving examples as to how it influences you.
Anytime.
We're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, we'll have an opportunity to talk to our co-producers and share what the theme for next month's episode will be. This content is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. The opinions expressed in the podcast are not those of Hearts Unite the Globe, but of the hosts and guests, and are intended to spark discussion about issues pertaining to congenital heart disease or bereavement.
Now it's time for our co-producers, Ayrton Beatty and Nicholle Bilodeau, to talk about this episode with me and Anna Jaworski. Now, Nicholle was born with a bicuspid aortic valve, but she didn't receive her diagnosis until recently, and she had her first open heart surgery just a few weeks after her diagnosis. Nicholle's co-producer is Ayrton Beatty. Ayrton was not born with a heart defect, but they developed long QT syndrome because of some medications they take for other issues. Nicholle and Ayrton were working behind the scenes during our recording.
We appreciate you ladies so much. So what did you think about the show, Nicholle?
I feel like I say the same thing every week because I really enjoyed it. And I also learned new things. I spent part of the episode in tears, which I didn't expect. I thought this one, I might not actually cry, but Anna, you were the one that had me in tears.
I'm sorry. I don't seem to make it through a CHC podcast episode without crying for some reason. I don't know why that is, but yeah, this was really good. And they did have me in tears. I'm sorry if I made you cry.
I was good up until you talked about how at one point you didn't think that Hope would ever see 30 and then just the waterworks started. I don't know why.
That's because you're so compassionate.
I try my best.
How about you, Ayrton? What did you think about the show?
Again, for me, it's learning about new things within the CHD community. And it's like Nicholle and I had to be in tears when she was talking about Hope and how she felt that Hope would never live to see 30.
Yeah, it's hard for me to go there. I think most of my life don't spend in that dark space. And every time I do go back there, it's almost like it was yesterday. I can still hear those doctors giving a negative prognosis and me being defiant, and thankfully Hope being so defiant that she was going to prove them wrong. So these adults give me so much hope for all of those CHD warriors out there that, you have the right attitude and some luck. Let's face it, a lot of people were really lucky to be able to survive the way they did without surgery or without the kind of care that we have today. It's really miraculous. So what surprised you the most, Ayrton?
Again, it's stories of tenacity and like Ben riding his big wheel down the hills after having his heart surgery
I know, I love
and his
that.
mum being scared. And I was like thinking back to my younger days when I was racing BMXs and chasing all the boys down these massive slopes from a mountain bikes and stuff. And my mum was freaking out, and that was without me having a CHD.
There is a different element. Frank and I have a heart healthy son that's 3 years older than Hope. And Joey would scare us for sure with the things that he did. But there's a different element when you have a child who has a funky heart, especially when that child has had surgery. I know that I was terrified every time I watched her do sparring in the dojo for Taekwondo because I was so afraid somebody was going to kick her in the chest. And her cardiologist said, "Oh no, if none of the other kids are wearing chest protection, she doesn't need it." I'm so glad she's not doing sparring anymore.
I think out of the three kids, I was the one who traumatized my parents the most.
Guy, did you want to add something?
Yeah, I did actually. I enjoyed U.S. bakery for the first time I've actually heard the two of you bickering about what Hope went through, and now you two do the same thing, but in completely different perspectives.
Yeah, I think it's okay that we have different opinions. I was taking Hope to all of her doctor's appointments while Frank was working so that we had money for those doctor's appointments. And I think I had a lot more interaction with the doctors than Frank did. So I think that impacted me differently than it did Frank. I think it's okay for parents to share their different opinions. And I think it's normal that any couple is going to experience things a little bit differently.
Agree 100%.
Thank you, Guy.
So, Nicholle, what surprised you the most?
What made me go wow during the episode was the information that we got about the mechanical heart. And I know that we don't have a whole lot of information about that yet, but it's the opportunities that it will create for those that either require a heart transplant or a heart and lung transplant in the future.
Yeah, that made me go, wow. I was so excited, and leave it to Michelle to be doing research because she is and always will be a scientist in so many different ways. So thank you for bringing that to our attention, Michelle. That also made me go, wow, Nicholle.
And made me as
I'm
well.
glad I'm not the only one.
Oh, no, it was amazing. What was your biggest takeaway, Nicholle?
Everybody's stories, Ben talking about his background and really getting into health and fitness. Prior to my diagnosis and my heart surgery, I was always the chubby person at the gym that could keep up. And I was really into the high intensity interval training classes. And I've been cleared to go back. And I just unfortunately can't find a local gym that's willing to take that risk to work with me. So I missed that. I enjoyed hearing about Ben's routine, and I'm hoping that it might inspire me and maybe some other potential CHDers to get back into the gym. Because I know that I do feel better when I've had a good workout.
I was excited to see that he did this during COVID and that they were on Zoom doing these classes together. I really think that's fantastic. I know there are a lot of people in the CHD community who maybe don't feel comfortable going into a gym for whatever reason. And I don't have a CHD, and I'm one of those people who don't feel comfortable going in a gym because I am so out of shape and I don't want people laughing at me as I try and do things that my body says, "Are you serious?"
Yeah, my old gym did the same thing with the Zoom classes. And then as things started to open up, they did in-person workouts in the parking lot where everybody got their own parking spot to work out of. And they would set it up with the dumbbells, the kettlebells, whatever you were going to be using for
Oh,
that
that's
day's
so
class. And then it was
great.
all sanitized afterward.
That's really
Wow.
cool.
Yeah, that's amazing.
I really enjoyed it. I miss it. So I'm hoping that I can find something that I can really get into and stick with now.
I think that's really what's tough sometimes is getting into a rhythm and routine and sticking with it. So I agree with you on that, Nicholle. Ayrton, what was your biggest takeaway from the show?
Again, the fitness journey
because like him, I started mine during COVID, and I really need to get back into doing it because I've noticed my weight starting to pick back up again. But it's trying to work with my heart problems that I've got going on at the minute, which can be quite difficult.
I can understand that. It is difficult when reality comes back and you're trying to get back into things.
It's hard
Yeah.
when you get old too. Frank and I are trying to get back into the Body for Life program. And now we're both in our 60s. So this will be interesting. And Ben was definitely such an inspiration. But you have been too, Ayrton, because I met you many years ago and I've seen you go through a lot of different phases where you have been working on your fitness and trying to get back in better shape. And I think if Ayrton can do it, I can do it. You're inspiring.
Yeah, for me, it got to the point where I was so overweight I could hardly walk because
Yeah,
of the
that's
amount of
fun.
pressure it was putting on the joint.
Mm-hmm.
So it got to the stage where it was like, for the sake of my health, I now need to do something.
Yeah. I think, like Ben was saying, that having a sense of fitness, both mentally and physically, is so important. And that's one of the reasons I love working with this podcast, is because I feel like once a week I get to be with all of you wonderful heart warriors and the other parents who volunteer. And we are all working on our mental health by talking and making this topic, which can be really difficult, more palatable. Annie, it's almost time for us to conclude this episode, but I don't want to stop yet. I want to know if you have any concluding thoughts about everything that we've talked about today.
I say this in every episode that there are so many things that come up as I'm taking notes that I'm either wowed about or I'm excited about because I've had very similar experiences. And like Amy and Michelle, Amy being a blue baby, that was me. And my biological mother didn't know I had a CHD because being in Peru, they didn't check for things like that back in 1979. And then Michelle, I wasn't until about a little older than 2 when I came up to Boston Children's Hospital on a medical visa to get diagnosed with a congenital heart defect. And being able to live that long and then have the BT shunt and then survive a little longer and then have the Fontan. My mom always asked my pediatric cardiologist, what are her limitations? What are her limitations? Like I can actually remember that being that young. And my doctor always said to my mother, she doesn't have any. Her body and her heart will tell you the limitation, and then she'll know how to limit herself. And quite honestly, I didn't have any limitations because I was lucky to feel so great. Until I got to my Fontan surgery, I needed that. And then after the Fontan, I've been able to do everything and anything until I hit about 28 with my different arrhythmias and stuff like Ben, having to go through that and being scared about what's going on. And knowing that not only is that community, but also the similarities on so many different stories that we're telling here and the realities, the scariness that we face, but also the excitement and the remembering of we all have a purpose somehow, even if it's just to wake up in the morning and say, I enjoy myself, I enjoy my life, I have a roof over my head and food to eat. That alone enough is where I say thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to not be in a hospital room. Thank you for the opportunity to go to the bathroom without needing to call a nurse or a doctor. So thank you all for sharing this wonderful moment in your lives with us.
I feel like this entire episode just radiated positivity. And for me, that was such a gift getting to talk to all of you, our patrons. We have several patrons amongst us and our volunteers and this wonderful panel. It just makes me feel so proud to be part of this community.
Yeah, I agree. Anna, how about you? Any concluding thoughts on this?
I wish I could have talked to all of you 30 years ago. I'm not going to start crying again, and I don't want to make anyone else start crying, but just hearing all of the stories, because all of you are older than that. I wish I had known all of you. It would have given me so much hope, and it would have prevented so many sleepless nights. But I guess it was meant for me to go through all of that because that's what fueled me becoming the advocate I am today and fueled me writing my books and starting a podcast because I wanted people to not feel alone. I think that was probably the hardest thing for me. so many years ago, was feeling like I was the only one having to navigate this really difficult course of parenthood, because my goal was to give Hope the most normal upbringing she could have, because I didn't know how many days she had. And it made me realize I didn't know how many days I had with Joey either. And I wanted to make every single day count. And I wanted every single day to be the best day it could be. So that if it was the end, oh, here I am going to start crying. Darn it.
It's okay. I understand.
So that if it was the end, that I could at least say, you know what? I did the best I could. We played games, we laughed, we loved each other, we shared with our friends, we shared with our relatives. And I think that's what we all need to do. Whether we have a heart defect or not, we all need to live each day as if it was our last, because we don't know how much time we have on this earth. And just to hear all of you say how hard you're working on fitness and how you're working on your mental health and how you want to be an inspiration to others and how you want to make other people feel less alone. It just makes me feel so proud to be one amongst all of you.
Thank you for everything that you do, Anna. We're very lucky to have you.
Oh, thank you for saying that. I appreciate
Yeah.
that.
You've given us the opportunity to feel less alone, even in our community.
Well, I love all of you. And unfortunately, I do have to conclude this episode. I could talk to you all forever, but I do have to say thank you so much for joining us today. To our listeners, thanks for joining us on the CHC Podcast. We hope you'll join us next month for our Caregiving for Caregivers in the CHD Community episode. We'll be talking to some amazing heart parents and spouses of adults with congenital heart conditions. Until then, I'm Anna Jaworski.
And I'm Annie Ulchak. Have a great day and keep those congenital heart conversations going on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube.
Thank you for joining us. The CHC Podcast can be heard monthly wherever you get your podcasts. Visit us on Facebook or Instagram to continue the conversations. Join the Hearts Unite the Globe Patreon group and become part of our town hall meetings. It's simple. Just visit www.heartsunitetheglobe.org and select the tab that says Donate to Hug with Patreon. Then you too can be part of the conversation.